All right, well, known EPA fighter Corey Willis, owner of PPEI Diesel Performance, had a testified in front of Congress this past week, and I have taken the liberty of taking the 2-hour and 40-minute video, cutting it up, and kind of going through some parts, breaking down some things, pointing out some parts of interest, and we can go through it here. Now, I will warn you, this is painful to watch, both because I don't want to sound too rude, but Higgins, who brought it all together and put it all out there, he is trying to end the EPA and end their insane overreach and their weaponization, mostly. He was unequipped, it felt like, to have this discussion, and now it wasn't laid out in a debate form, it was laid out, obviously, in a congressional subcommittee hearing, and yeah, it just wasn't beautiful. Unfortunately, I kind of feel bad for Corey. I feel like he was brought there, and they kind of railroaded him a little bit, and it just was not. It was not pretty. But let's listen to some of it. We'll warn you, Higgins is a bit of a slow talker. He's the representative from Louisiana, and it's a little slow moving at times. I will jump around because, like I said, the video is 2 hours, 40 minutes. Probably 40 minutes of it is just like swearing in, this is so-and-so, this is so-and-so, legal jargon, I guess you could say. And then another hour of it was 20, 30 minutes in. They decided to take an hour recess of just like, it just started. Why are we doing this? Whatever. But I will give you the quick intro of what happened.
The Subcommittee on Federal Law Enforcement will come to order. We welcome everyone. We are waiting on a couple of members to arrive. However, we're going to begin. Respectful of our witnesses, one of whom has a hard stop. I know we have votes scheduled at about 1:30. So we're going to move forward. I recognize myself for the purpose of making an opening statement. Today, the subcommittee is going to hear about the aggressive enforcement tactics employed by the Environmental Protection Agency and the Department of Justice to intimidate small businesses into consent agreements and other enforcement actions. Today's hearing focuses on one specific issue: the overly aggressive enforcement tactics, many of which are better suited for hardened criminal enforcement, used by the Biden administration to intimidate hardworking small business owners and set an example through regulatory terror against everyday American entrepreneurs. The Clean Air Act clearly provides the EPA with criminal enforcement authority. Like it or not, Congress granted the EPA that authority. What is in question is whether the agency, which has seen its enforcement program shift from prosecuting industrial polluters to persecuting small businesses, the question is whether or not they have fairly and consistently applied its use of criminal authority, or if enforcement actions under any administrations were hypercharged in pursuit of left-wing political objectives under the so-called banner of environmental justice.
So, like I said, it's a lot of that. Nothing against this man. He seems like a good person. I've disagreed with him on a few things, but that is neither here nor there. Basically, he is just talking about the weaponization of the Clean Air Act against small business owners like Corey, and trying to hold people accountable, trying for some pushback, trying to end it, trying to get some answers. Really anything. I mean, again, the objective is fairly unclear from just watching this. They're basically just trying to get things on the record. That's kind of what it is to put things on legal record. I know. It's not a huge thing, but I can't find another example of somebody with an automotive business actually being in a congressional hearing like this, even if it's just a subcommittee hearing. So I watched it. I know. I don't have much of an exciting life here. We can scroll through a little bit. We can listening to another woman's opening statement. Unfortunately, this is where it might get frustrating. I'll get into that in a second, though. So I guess some of his other points are, his main overarching point is the EPA has too much power. They corrupt absolutely. They should not have an armed arm of the EPA. The EPA should not have federally armed agents that raid facilities. They are a regulatory body. They give out fines. They don't need a SWAT team, which is what they have and have used on many occasions. He is saying they should have worked with and should have to work with local and federal law enforcement and not be their own enforcing arm of it, because they should not be both the fines and also the muscle of it. That's basically his overall stance on it from what I gathered. And that makes a lot of sense. I don't think the EPA needs to have firearms. I've said that before, and I'll say it again. So let's listen to a little bit of the next one here.
Enforcing our environmental laws is critical to protecting public health and ensuring that every person in this country has access to clean air, safe water, and healthy land. When EPA enforces the law, children can breathe without inhalers or drink water without lead and play outside without fear of developing rare cancers. I recognize that navigating the EPA regulations isn't always straightforward, especially for small businesses. But complexity does not make enforcement cases have been dropped. And instead of focusing more premature death. The solution to confusion is to single public health and businesses from liability. But under the Trump administration, the EPA has abandoned its responsibilities. Workers have been laid off, funding has been withheld, more than 160 corporate enforcement cases have been dropped. And instead of focusing on the largest polluters, enforcement has too often relied on criminal penalties against small players. At the same time, Trump has dismantled the EPA's Environmental Justice Office as nearly 200 staff laid off or pushed out. In March, EPA stopped considering environmental justice altogether in enforcement decisions. A former EPA staffer warned that without those staff on the job, the air we breathe and the water that we drink are at a greater risk from toxic pollution that causes cancer, asthma, and lung disease. EPA has stopped accepting new civil rights complaints or issuing findings of discrimination under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. 13 complaints are now in limbo, including one over poultry waste polluting Black and Indigenous communities in North Carolina. Families living next to refineries and highways are being told their health doesn't matter. So let's be clear. And the only persecution we should be talking about is what Black and brown and poor families have endured for generations. Families forced to raise their kids in the shadows of smokestacks. Children that are twice as likely to die from asthma. Communities where cancer rates soar beyond the national averages. And a government that continues to turn its back on them. The Trump administration's actions are alarming and abhorrent. But I would be remiss not to note the absurdity of this hearing. If this subcommittee on federal law enforcement were serious, we'd be examining the most lawless administration in modern history, one that is illegally withholding congressionally appropriated funds, dismantling federal agencies, firing watchdogs, deploying troops into American citizens, and withholding documents about one of the worst child sex traffickers in history. Just outside of these walls, Washington, D.C. is still under federal occupation. But instead, we're here having a hearing focused on the past, talking about, quote, weaponized environmental enforcement, while the current right now, administration dismantles all of our environmental protections to the detriment of our air, our land, our water, our health, and yes, our people. I yield back.
So, what a beautiful deflection there. I mean, that was unbelievably well executed. Instead of facing this issue head on, the fact that the EPA has attacked small businesses, something that they did not originally set out to do, instead of attacking that problem head on, she deflects and brings up what is currently going on. Which, okay, fine, but maybe that could be a different subcommittee. Maybe you can have a different hearing for that. I don't think it's wrong to talk about previous attacks at all. Like the man sitting in front of you was attacked by a weaponized EPA, and you are brushing it off and saying, yeah, but that happened already. I don't care about that. No, it matters to people and him. You can't just deflect it and say, too bad. You have to face the problem head on. Just because it happened in the past, is that how we're going to act? When you talk about systemic racism here in a minute, can I just say it happened in the past? We need to talk about what's happening right now? So frustrating. Okay, so we'll get into a little bit of Corey's opening speech here. I don't know how long it was. I put everything a little bit faster just to speed things up, them talking a little bit faster.
The gentlelady yields back. We have a member.
Chairman Higgins, Ranking Member Lee, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. It is a privilege and an honor to be here, and it is by the grace of God that I'm able to be here today. My name is Corey Willis, and I own Power Performance Enterprises Incorporated, better known as PPI. I love God, my country, and my family. I want to share what I've experienced during the past decade since the government started prosecuting me and my company, culminating in a civil consent decree in 2022. I walked at 11 months and I was placed on my first floor 1 month later. I quickly learned the fastest way to get from point A to point B was not walking, it was machines, leading me to eventually start PPI when I was 19 years old. PPI started as a company that specialized in high-performance tuning of vehicles for racing, and interest in our products grew as it became evident that diesel vehicles with the original manufacturer emissions control devices were failing. Regular guys like me had to choose between fixing their cars or enjoying a vacation or dinner out. My tunes solved their problems and in fact made their cars drive more efficiently. It also took off for others who wanted to see their everyday cars go faster. The journey with the EPA started on my 25th birthday, November 3rd, 2015, almost 10 years ago, when I received a request for information from the EPA. We forwarded it to the attorneys to handle, for me thinking it was a formality and essentially not a big deal. I had no idea the EPA was making a change in their enforcement priorities to include our industry practice. In the years following that information request, my family and I spent several million dollars in legal and accounting fees, and hundreds of, even thousands of hours of staff time responding to the EPA's demands and trying to understand EPA's position on the sales of our company's tunes. We tried to differentiate certain aspects of our business, including related to military and emergency vehicles and off-road or competition use, all of which are supposed to be not subject to the strict federal emission standards. The propaganda machine has led many to believe that combustion engines are far more harmful than they really are. We scrambled to try to come to agreeable terms regarding what we could and could not sell and the appropriate penalty. This was a massive undertaking by our legal team and staff. For example, one of our document productions was 44,000 pages. At one point during the civil consent decree negotiations,
So basically, he's just talking about, what he's had to go through. He later goes into how he was helping people during a hurricane impact when the EPA was still firing things off at him and pushing him for responses and all this stuff and so on. It's a good speech. It's worth a listen to, but I'm trying not to make this video too long here. I mean, I got almost an hour of footage here, but we're trying to bomb through it all so you guys get the condensed version of it. I'm not a pro at this.
Thank you for the opportunity to
And then his lawyer speaks.
I'm here today to focus on the surge of criminal environmental enforcement against small automotive industry players for check engine light violations, also called onboard diagnostic or OBD tampering, the lack of statutory authority for these prosecutions, and the impact of this weaponization on small businesses and individuals. As President Trump and EPA Administrator Zeldin have said, economic prosperity and environmental stewardship are compatible. To accomplish that mission, we are blessed with many dedicated leaders and public servants at EPA and DOJ. The problem we have is that environmental enforcement can stray from its core mission, becoming a game of gotcha where due process, fair notice, and proportional punishments are thrown out the window.
So that is Corey's lawyer, then talks for a little bit, likely falls on deaf ears, and then it goes back to Mr. Eric, is it Schaefer? I can't remember how they said his last name. He's the Environmental Integrity Project lead and he's kind of the expert on the EPA stuff, so they bring him in to go through some of the things. Then they take a recess, and then I think what is of more interest is the descending agreements, the descending arguments to this, like the I guess it's the Democrat side of things and what they have to say. Some of their speeches are horrendously painful.
Was regarding your people, and Mr. Willis has squared away business. According, as far as he knew, he was following every law, state law.
So then they talk about how they've damaged Corey's business, and this is a pretty interesting segment as well.
And later on, I did my best to help, and we were heavily involved, and we couldn't find anything that he had done wrong. It seemed like it was a targeted investigation and persecution. I didn't really want to believe that about my government, but it seemed that way. And they began enforcing, it seems like, if you can speak to this, Mr. Willis, California emission standard. Did you sell parts in California? What would happen if I was in California and I wanted to order one of your tuning kits?
Our website back then and still today, if you're in California, it doesn't allow full checkout.
Why not?
We don't sell to California.
Why not?
It's extremely difficult to do business in California.
Because do they have different emission standards?
Yes, sir. CARB standards.
So as a squared away business owner, you recognize that? You just didn't do business in California, correct?
Correct.
Did the EPA use California standards to prosecute your civil case and your criminal case?
Our plea agreement requires us to utilize California standards.
But you didn't do business in California, did you?
No, sir.
Do you now?
We never shipped into
Have you ever?
California. No, sir. We've never shipped into California.
Okay.
Unless it got through.
Hey, can you speak to how much economic impact this had on you? Like, how much money did you end up paying to the EPA? Can you speak to that?
Yes, sir. It was in excess of $3.1 million.
Okay, how much have you estimated conservatively how much business you've lost over the last decade, you and your family?
Just the last 5 years on emissions compliant products, probably around 12 million. And then if we're talking full racing products, probably over 100 million.
And what have you, can you speak to what you've paid counsel, what you've had to pay attorneys over the last decade?
Yes, sir. In excess of 7 million.
So you haven't.
Lawyers always win. Lawyers always win. So if you didn't hear that, he said that he's basically lost in excess of 150-ish million. 7 million to lawyers, 3+ million to the EPA fines, and then the plea agreement that they had to agree to be CARB compliant, which is obviously unfortunate for a diesel business, I would imagine. This one, after a very long recess, it was like this screen for quite some time. Committee on Oversight and Government Reform in recess. Good for them, you know? Don't want to work too hard. This next woman speaks very fittingly. There's a woman with blue hair behind her, and let's hear what she has to say because her speech is painful.
And thank you to our witnesses for coming today. This is an important conversation. The health of our children and our families is, and I know, important to all of us. And one of the reasons why the voters in my district sent me here to Congress, so I'm excited about this conversation. This administration is actively, and my...
This administration. This is talking about the Biden administration attacking people, and they both, so far, couldn't respond to that.
Office's opinion undermined the enforcement of laws and regulations that ensure that we all have access to clean air, clean water, and land that is safe to live in regardless of our incomes and zip code. In March 2025, the Environmental Protection Agency illegally terminated over 400 grants as part of this administration's anti-DEI crusade, and these grants were aimed at mitigating childhood lead poisoning, air pollution, and health risks from heat and wildfires. The EPA also canceled multiple grants related to childhood asthma, clean drinking water, and housing projects. This included a $500,000 grant for the West Oakland, this is in my district, Environmental Indicators Project through the Inflation Reduction Act, and a $75,000 grant for the same organization for the Port of Oakland's transition to zero emissions. Mr. Chair, I ask for unanimous.
So she's of California. I'm pretty sure she just said zero emissions. Emissions? I don't think she said it right. Let's just listen.
To zero admissions. Mr.
Admissions.
Chair, I ask for unanimous
Like a
consent,
college.
sir, to enter into the record OA list of targeted grants.
Without objection.
In the months since, the EPA has nearly doubled the number of canceled grants to 800, which had already been awarded in the funds obligated by the previous administration. In July 2025, Capacity Collaborative, based in Oakland, another program, had 2 grants terminated, totaling $6 million that was supporting leadership training for Indian/indigenous communities in Hawaii and youth training in Alabama harmed by environmental racism to self-advocate to protect their own community's health and environment. Housing and corporate racism have meant that the majority of highways, power plants, waste storage, and industrial plants have been built near low-income and communities of color. This reality has created health consequences.
Yes, it is cheaper to live near factories and power plants. Of course.
For real folks in communities throughout the nation, not just in my district. Many studies, we all know, have shown that communities of color have higher rates of asthma, especially childhood asthma, because of access and excess pollution near their homes and their schools. For example, according to the East Bay Community Foundation, a recent study found that in West and downtown Oakland, there are more than 70% residents or people of color. 1 in 2 childhood asthma cases were due to traffic-related air pollution in nearby Oakland Hills, which is a very affluent community. The rate to pollution is only 1 in 5. Now, Mr. Schaefer, how will cutting nearly 800 grants for environmental justice exacerbate existing health disparities for our community's children?
I will say correlation doesn't equal causation, so there might be more to look into, lady. And then she asks Mr. Schaefer his opinion. He kind of rambles on through a couple different stats. It's not really all that interesting. This guy is on Corey's side, and he presumably reads a statement written by someone else, and he doesn't know what he's reading. I don't think he's ever read it before. I don't think he looked at it before, and he just kind of listen to the way that he like enunciates some things that just don't make sense.
By the Wisconsin DNR, the EPA show that most ozone pollution originates south of Wisconsin. What is your take on causation and downwind liabilities? Is it fair? And is the EPA out of control with kind of this anti-business feeling? And what type of scientific proof should the EPA be required to meet in demonstrating that ambient air is non-attainment?
He does that for, I don't know, 5-ish so minutes where it's like hard to really follow what he's trying to say because he's not really reading something that he understands, and he's kind of just like saying words out loud that like he doesn't know what the next word is even. He doesn't even know what he's reading. It could have just been on a screen for me to read. Probably would have been better off.
For example, it would cost us
Corey speaks again.
$22,000 right now to get the testing on the new Ford diesel done, only to have to wait for CARB to act. Our new products were tested and without fail. They passed SEMA's comprehensive testing regime. We complied, we tested, we passed, and we provided the results to CARB, but they have not approved a single application in well over 2 years, placing our company on the brink of collapse.
So He's basically saying how he provided all of the evidence and all of the testing to CARB so that they can approve his products for sale, because he himself legally has to follow CARB standards, and CARB never actually got back with approval even after 2 years. I don't know if there's some clause in there maybe that they were supposed to be prompt at least 90 days on an answer, but it is pretty insane. This guy actually is kind of on his side. I was happy for this. He actually understood what was going on. He maybe prepared a little bit before and didn't just have a staffer do it.
The EPA was doing a so-called study where they were pumping asthmatic children in a gas chamber full of particulate matter. Are you familiar with that?
I am not.
Well, I am. And what I'm telling you is that the regulation...
Also, he just said that the EPA is using gas chambers on children. That is something worth noting, I would say. Fairly interesting. His speech, again, it wasn't super moving. He didn't really add a whole lot to the context here.
On your employment that you created out of thin air, out of nothing, out of hard work and an idea. And the federal government came and then to say, hey, Mr. Willis, we want to work with you here. We want to just make sure we're doing the right thing. Maybe you don't realize X, Y, and Z. Can you help us understand, and can we work with you to keep on hiring those people, keep on employing those people, keep on doing the great things you're doing, maybe do it a little differently, even though it's all based on fraudulent data, by the way. Everything you're being accused of and being persecuted for is based on fraudulent data, everything. But they wouldn't even do that, would they? They immediately they went to the California Air Resources Board, not because they wanted to get the answer, because they want you out of business. Because they want you out of business. How long has it taken for you to get a response from CARB?
It's roughly 90 days is where we're in between communications with CARB.
Okay, so when did this whole communication start?
Started around 2022.
Well, it's 2025, Mr. Willis. How many 90-day periods can you go through and sustain and pay your bills and your employees and your insurance and your taxes?
We're at the point of laying off employees and whatnot.
I'm sorry to hear it, Mr. Willis. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
See, he actually stood up pretty well. But he is standing up to people that don't care if he has any employees or not. These people that he is, like the audience he's speaking to here, the other side, if you will, the Democrats. I hate putting things into parties like that, but he's speaking to people that want to see that exact thing he's describing as bad. Like, he's saying, like, he is a reasonable moral man, and he's saying this is bad that these people are losing their jobs. But that's what they want. So he's like, they're like, okay, awesome. Like, we did our job. Then they talk to him again, and it's kind of hoopla. And let's hear.
Challenging for small business owners, but we also have to acknowledge the scale of the public health impact we're dealing with when environmental laws aren't followed. To understand the facts of this case, I'd like to seek unanimous consent to enter Mr. Willis's plea agreement into the record. I know you're not going to take 5 seconds to say yes, right?
I'm not certain that let's talk about that.
Okay, well, I'm going to come back for those 30 seconds or so.
She's not a very nice lady. And then this man talks right here.
Starting over, Republicans are working to dismantle the very protections that keep our air and water safe, protections they dismiss as so-called burdens. But when government makes it easier for corporations to pollute, the real burdens fall on the people. Mr. Chair, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record this September 2025 article from WBUR titled "Fear and Low Morale in New England's EPA Office as it Loses a Quarter of Its Staff Under Trump." This reporting makes clear to the lives of those who have been laid off. In Boston's Chinatown, which I'm proud to represent in the Massachusetts 7th, families live at the
Okay, so they do actually feel bad that the EPA employees were laid off. They do feel bad about that. that the federal employees were laid off. That's good. They care.
Intersection of two interstate highways. It is a vibrant neighborhood, rich in culture and history, but one that has been paying the price of pollution for generations. Study after study confirms what my constituents already know. Chinatown routinely has the worst air quality in Massachusetts because of toxic.
There's a little irony there, right? The Chinatown has the worst pollution. I mean, come on. That's just like, come on.
Toxic air emissions. Mr. Schaefer, what are the public health consequences for frontline communities when environmental protections are weakened?
Increased risk of cancer, heart disease, asthma attacks, premature mortality from these pollutants. And I just again want to insist these issues have been studied and studied and studied. There are areas where there's room for debate, and there are other areas where the evidence is really obvious about the hazard.
Thank you. Yes, less environmental protections means more children with asthma, more elders with heart disease, and more families with preventable illnesses and lives cut short. Parents in Boston know what it's like to watch their child wheeze on the way to school or to spend hours in an ER on a bad air quality day. Asthma alone causes 14 million missed school days a year nationwide, meaning our children are falling behind in class because of pollution in the air they breathe. And these burdens are not equally shared. Mr. Schaefer, what does the evidence tell us about racial disparities and exposure to pollution? That's right. And Black children are twice as likely to develop asthma because communities of color in Boston and across the country are disproportionately forced to breathe dirtier air, drink less safe water, and be subject to risks they didn't create. In Mattapan and Roxbury, two predominantly Black and brown neighborhoods in my district.
Who is forcing them to live in certain places? Who is forcing this?
Children are 7 times more likely, 7, to go to the emergency room for asthma attacks compared to children in more affluent neighborhoods just a couple of miles away. Now, Republicans want to strip away some of the only tools these communities have to hold polluters accountable when companies refuse to follow the law. Mr. Schaefer, how do the policies we're discussing today work to ensure companies account for the costs of their pollution?
And first of all, I want to sort of reiterate, we're talking about aftermarket defeat devices that are sold to strip out or disable emission controls in trucks. I mean, common sense ought to tell you that's wrong. It's wrong to do that. I don't know how many pamphlets or notices you need to read before you understand you really shouldn't do that. If you do, EPA has found the nitrogen oxide emissions will be 310 times higher than they are from a diesel truck that meets the standards. The particulates from diesel exhaust will be, I can't remember, many times higher, at least in order of magnitude. Same for hydrocarbons. So you're really talking about...
I don't really love that he has like a moral stance in this. Like, I feel like his stance is supposed to be like scientific, and he's taking like a moral stance. Like, it's just obvious that you shouldn't delete an emission device from your personal vehicle. It's obvious. It's for emissions. Like, you wouldn't delete it.
Controls of that pollution that meet the limits, or no controls at all in a lot of these cases, and the impact
every year from air pollution. I yield back.
Okay, let's listen to this lady again.
Yet this is the same committee that last week voted to vastly expand criminalization. And in fact, later today, we'll vote on 2 of those measures. And I expect every member of the majority to once again support these bills. The same voices lamenting government overreach when it comes to environmental enforcement have no problem expanding the carceral system for children when it serves their agenda. I have serious concerns about our over-reliance on overcriminalization as a solution to social issues. I believe we incarcerate too many people in this country. I believe the criminal legal system disproportionately harms communities of color and people without resources. I believe we should be skeptical of expanding criminal penalties as a first resort. But this committee applies these principles selectively. When environmental enforcement protects communities from toxic pollution, suddenly we care about proportional punishment. When it's the corporations that face accountability for poisoning the air children breathe, suddenly criminal penalties are excessive. When businesses with multi-million-dollar monthly revenues face consequences for breaking the law, suddenly we discover concerns about government overreach. Where is the same compassion for the teenager caught with marijuana? Where is this concern about disproportionate punishment for the mother struggling with addiction? Where is this skepticism about criminalization when it affects people who don't have corporate lawyers and public relations teams? The answer is nowhere, because this isn't really addressing over-criminalization in our government. It's about who deserves protection from government power and who doesn't. While we debate whether corporations are being treated unfairly, children in overburdened communities are developing asthma at rates that should shock us. My community is one that suffers from amongst the highest in the country. While we worry about the burden on businesses, families are breathing air poisoned by devices specifically designed to bypass pollution.
So, yeah, that's pretty much the end of it. It's quite sad. Quite sad. I'll link the whole thing if you want to listen, but man, it's boring. Corey, if you're watching this, I hope I did it justice breaking it down. I'm sure there's things you'd like to say about this that you can't. Representative Higgins, I know he did his best, but he seemed to have gotten smoked in this deal, and it's mostly because these women brought up things that were completely off topic, which is unfortunate. They're talking about things that are 2 different subcommittee hearings, and somehow they brought them all into one. Couldn't stick to the topic at hand. Pollution is racist. The EPA is a social justice warrior program, and if you make over $1 million a year or have millions of dollars in gross revenue, you deserve to, your business to fail. I had a lot more choice words go through my brain there, but yeah, sucks. So we'll see what happens from this. Obviously, it's government, so nothing. Thank you guys so much for watching. Keep it saucy. I'll see you next time.